Detective Tales, The Secret of Ashwick Manor. The rain pounded mercilessly against the cobblestone streets of Ashwick, a small, forgotten town nestled in the rolling hills of England's countryside. Detective Evelyn Hartley had heard of Ashwick in passing, but it was never a place that seemed worth her attention. That all changed when she received a letter, hastily written and filled with a desperation that she hadn't encountered in years. The letter came from an old acquaintance, Margaret Ashwick, the last surviving member of the Ashwick family who had once owned most of the town. The letter spoke of strange occurrences at Ashwick Manor, the family's sprawling, decaying estate. Margaret's words painted a vivid picture of shadows moving on their own, doors creaking open in the dead of night, and whispers echoing through the halls. Whispers that spoke her name. But most unsettling was Margaret's claim that someone, or something, had been watching her. She begged Evelyn to come quickly, fearing for her life. Evelyn, a seasoned detective known for her meticulous methods and sharp instincts, had seen enough in her career to know that fear often clouded people's judgment. However, something about Margaret's letter gnawed at her, and Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a case of paranoia. The journey to Ashwick was long, the train winding through rain-soaked hills and misty forests, finally delivering Evelyn to the small station just outside the town. The rain hadn't let up, and the air was thick with the smell of wet earth and decay. Evelyn pulled her coat tighter around her as she made her way toward the manor. Ashwick Manor loomed ahead, a towering relic of a bygone era. Its stone walls were cracked, ivy crawling up like veins, and the windows were dark, giving the impression that the house was a slumbering giant, waiting for something to stir it awake. Margaret greeted her at the door, her once vibrant face now pale and gaunt. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days. "Thank you for coming," Margaret whispered, her voice trembling as she led Evelyn into the grand foyer. The house was just as Evelyn had expected, dust-covered furniture, faded portraits of long-dead relatives, and an air of neglect that clung to every corner. But there was something else. An oppressive feeling, a weight that seemed to press down on Evelyn's chest the moment she stepped inside. "What's been happening here, Margaret?" Evelyn asked as they sat by the dimly lit fireplace in the drawing room. Margaret's eyes darted around the room, as though she was afraid someone, or something, might be listening. "It started a few months ago," Margaret began, her voice barely above a whisper. "At first it was small things. Items moved, doors left open that I know I closed. Then it became more. I'd hear footsteps in the halls at night, but when I looked, no one was there. And the whispers, oh Evelyn, the whispers. They call my name. Every night they call my name." Evelyn listened carefully, her mind sorting through possibilities. A haunted house, a family curse. These were the kinds of tales she often dismissed, but Margaret was clearly terrified. And Evelyn trusted Margaret, or at least trusted her enough to know that something real was happening here, even if it wasn't supernatural. "I need to see the rest of the house," Evelyn said after a moment. Margaret hesitated but eventually agreed, leading her through the dark, winding corridors of Ashwick Manor. The house was enormous, each room more neglected than the last. But there was one room, the study, that seemed strangely untouched by time. It was here, Margaret explained, that her father, Lord Edwin Ashwick, had spent most of his days before his untimely death 20 years ago. "He was obsessed with something," Margaret said, her voice barely a whisper. "Some kind of research. I never understood it, but after his death, I found his journals. They were filled with strange symbols, diagrams, things that didn't make any sense. I burned them. I thought it was madness." "Where did he die?" Evelyn asked, her voice steady as she scanned the room. The study was neatly arranged, but there was a strange air of tension, as if the room itself held secrets it wasn't willing to reveal. Margaret hesitated, her hand trembling as she pointed to a large portrait of Lord Edwin that hung above the fireplace. Here, right in this room. They said it was a heart attack, but I always felt like there was more to it. Evelyn nodded, taking mental notes. She felt there was something more to Lord Ashwick's death as well, but she needed proof. As they left the study, she caught sight of a small door hidden behind a tapestry at the end of the hallway. It was locked, and when Evelyn asked about it, Margaret's face paled. "That's the basement," Margaret said, her voice shaking. "I haven't been down there in years. My father always said it was off-limits. Can you unlock it?" Evelyn asked, her curiosity piqued. Margaret hesitated but eventually fetched the key. The lock was old and rusted, and it took a few tries before the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase that led into the darkness below. The air was damp and musty as they descended into the basement, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The basement was vast, much larger than Evelyn had anticipated. It was filled with old furniture, crates, and strange artifacts that looked like they belonged in a museum. But what caught Evelyn's attention was a large, circular stone slab in the center of the room, covered in strange, intricate carvings. "What is this?" Evelyn asked, crouching down to examine the carvings more closely. "I don't know," Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. "It was my father's. He spent hours down here working on whatever this is." Evelyn's mind raced as she traced the symbols with her fingers. They were unlike anything she had ever seen before, but something about them felt familiar, as though she had encountered them in a different context, perhaps in one of the many cases she had worked on over the years. As Evelyn continued to investigate, a loud crash echoed from upstairs, followed by the sound of footsteps running through the house. Both women froze. "Stay here," Evelyn whispered, drawing her pistol from her coat. She moved silently up the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest as she approached the foyer. The front door was wide open, and the rain was pouring in, but there was no sign of anyone. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corner of her eye, and Evelyn spun around, her pistol raised. But there was no one there, just the sound of the wind howling through the open door. Frustrated, Evelyn shut the door and turned back toward the drawing room. That's when she saw it. Something glinting in the dim light. A small object had been placed on the mantel above the fireplace. It was an old, tarnished locket, and when Evelyn opened it, she found a photograph inside. It was a picture of Margaret as a child, standing next to a man who was not her father. Evelyn's blood ran cold as she realized the implications. Margaret had never mentioned anyone else being in the house, but someone had been here, and they had left this locket as a message. Returning to the basement, Evelyn confronted Margaret with the locket. Margaret's face turned ashen, and she began to tremble. "Where did you find that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Upstairs. Someone was in the house, Margaret." "Who is this man?" Margaret's lips quivered as she tried to speak, but no words came out. Finally, she collapsed into a chair, her hands shaking. "He was my father's partner," she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. "They were working on something together, something dangerous. After my father died, he disappeared. I thought he was gone forever." Evelyn pressed for more details, but Margaret was too distraught to continue. It was clear that whatever Lord Ashwick and his partner had been working on, it had not died with them. Someone was still watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. As night fell over Ashwick Manor, Evelyn knew that the answers lay in the basement, in the strange symbols carved into the stone slab. She spent hours poring over her notes, trying to decipher their meaning, but it wasn't until the early hours of the morning that she had a breakthrough. The symbols were part of an ancient ritual, one that was meant to summon something that should have stayed buried. Lord Ashwick and his partner had been playing with forces they didn't understand, and it had cost them their lives. The realization hit Evelyn like a ton of bricks. The strange occurrences, the whispers, the feeling of being watched. It was all connected to the ritual. And whoever had been watching Margaret was trying to finish what Lord Ashwick had started. With renewed determination, Evelyn knew she had to stop them before it was too late.